Okay, Chapter 6. Cops and Robbers King Size. Roaming around unleashed wore thin much more quickly than anticipated. In less than a week, I went up to a branch office and asked the head of my section if I could trot away to school and make a little more advantageous use of all the time on my hands. There were several OSS institutions of higher learning within reach, and since I had been told I wouldn't be going overseas for at least another month, I asked to be sent to one. My request wound up on the desk of a rather slow-witted Marine captain. The news that I wanted to do something came to him as a profound shock. His first remark was typical. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" "Not yet, sir, but I'm likely to be soon if I keep hanging around this laughing academy with nothing to do." After a bit of wrangling, I convinced the man that my intentions were honorable. He was overwhelmed to the point where he outdid himself and made arrangements for me to go up to Area E, romantically and erroneously called the Spy School. This area didn't turn out the finished product. You didn't send them a man and get back a spy. It taught the basic fundamentals and was designed primarily to find out if a student was worth further training. He learned a great deal about becoming an agent in the process and practiced what he learned on actual problems, but no one went from Area E into the real thing. He was first sent to the advanced schools, almost all of which were located overseas in the theater of operations involved. There, he got the authentic agent instruction. Area E was excellent as far as it went, which was not much past kindergarten when it came to espionage education. I was delighted at the idea of going there, but I knew perfectly well I wasn't going to be a secret agent anytime soon, not unless some theater intelligence chief would settle for a deaf mute. I could get by in French, but as for passing as a native of La Belle Française, I'd have done just as well pretending I was one of her Saint-Gelais sons. So I went to Area E, hoping that whatever I happened to learn might come in handy sometime, somewhere. Getting ready to go was complicated. The trip called for civilian clothes, which sent me hurrying to Annapolis. The sight of me heisting a dozen of my father's white shirts and changing into mufti sent the family into consultation. This time they decided I'd deserted and voted practically unanimously to stick by me. The only dissenting ballot was cast by our cook, whose patriotism knew no bounds. She was all for turning me in. Getting to Area S had been slinky enough. Going to E was twice that, and carry too. First, I had to have a false name. Having done well with Cobber, I chose it again. Second, there was a sealed envelope to be opened at 8 sharp the next morning with me dressed and ready to skip town. Third, an absolute airtight cover. Getting one was no problem. Keeping it for a month with everyone around me here and there trying to break through it was something else. I planned to get a good night's rest so the sealed envelope and I would be on reading terms in the morning. It was not to be. Eric knocked the door down and dragged me away to what started out as a perfectly nice party, degenerated into something less, and wound up displaying all the least admirable features of a medieval boar hunt. I lasted just long enough to leave word with the switchboard operator. "This is Lieutenant Hall. Please call me at 7 in the morning. "Yes, sir. Good night." And again at 7:15. "Yes, sir. Good night." And again at 7:30. "Yes, Lieutenant. Would you like us to do them then? Blast?" They did have to send someone up to knock on the door at 7:30. The second time the phone rang, I disconnected it the hard way. The knocking finally awakened me, but that was only half the battle. I was in grand condition to start training. The only part about being a spy which interested me was the prospect of being executed by a firing squad. I read my instructions after tearing the envelope open and the enclosed letter in half with one trembling gesture. It was terse, which was fortunate. I was to go to Baltimore, be there by 11 in the morning, walk from the Penn Station to the Mount Royal Hotel, find a black Buick sedan with Maryland license plates so-and-so, ask the driver if he was Dr. Baxter, and he would be. From then on, I was in his hands. I was to maintain my cover at all times, act normally, and not get picked up. If I did get into trouble, I was to talk my way out of it. If things became completely unmanageable, there was a phone number to call, but it was to be used only after all else had failed. I sneered at the thought. They'd never take me alive. Feeling the way I did, it was an even money bet. I carefully selected and cautiously eaten breakfast, followed by a leisurely stroll to the station, restored my health. Once on board the train, I amused myself by trying to spot other members of the class headed for Area E. I was sure some of them must be going over with me. There were two fine prospects in the car. One was making a singularly unconvincing attempt to appear terribly casual. The other gave the impression of having recently committed murder. I began to stare first at one, then the other. Whenever either looked up, I'd fix him with a suspicious glare. The murderer actually began to sweat, so I stopped bothering him, but the actor became worse by the minute. I was mulling over a plan to frighten him to death when I realized I might be looking just as ridiculous to some unknown student who might have me spotted. I was feeling properly contrite when a good-looking, well-dressed young man slid into the seat beside me. He smiled, nodded, and said 2 words. "Hi, spy." I fought back a desire to dive through the window, remained magnificently cool, and asked, "I beg your pardon?" I said, "Hi, spy." It's not too good, is it? Well, anyway, you're going to Area E, and so am I. My name's Student Gordon. What's yours? They aren't going to knock me out of it that fast. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Mr. Gordon. I'm going to New York, not Area E, wherever that may be. If it'll make you any happier to know my name, it's Robert Hawthorne. This guy wanted a cover story. He was going to get mine with a lace border. I waited for his next lead. If you want to play games, all right. I thought you might remember meeting me at that party last night in the Statler. You were a paratroop lieutenant then. You're in civvies now. You're in the OSS, and I'll bet you're meeting a Dr. Baxter in Baltimore. I honestly don't remember your real name, so you can stop worrying about that. All this in a properly low voice. I had to grin back at him. 20 minutes out of Washington, and I was deep in conversation with another student, which was strictly against the rules. You win, Mastermind. I'm Student Cobber. We shook hands and were firm friends by the time the train arrived in Baltimore. We parted company in front of the station, and 5 minutes later greeted each other effusively in front of the Mount Royal Hotel, which was complete with the black Buick sedan, Dr. Baxter, the actor, the murderer, and a third young man who looked far more capable than the other 3 put together. Gordon greeted the doctor with a hearty, "Hello, Baxter, you old quack. I hear they've suspended your license. Well, you can't save 'em all. Don't remember me, eh? Name's Gordon. This is my friend Cobber. He's a mental case, but only occasionally violent." We piled into the Buick, chattering merrily and not bothering to explain how we'd come to know each other. Dr. Baxter, I won $1 from Gordon betting he'd turn out to be a corporal, got in behind the wheel, ignored Gordon's polite, "Would you like me to drive?" and started us off on the first leg of our perilous journey. The area turned out to be near Cockeysville, a somewhat remote hamlet in my native state of Maryland. On the way, Gordon and I tried to talk to the others, but quickly gave up on the actor and the murderer. The third student, who looked more capable, introduced himself as Student Mitch and fitted into our company nicely. E was another country estate, larger and more sprawling than S, but not as nice. There was no triumphal entry this time. One rather forlorn individual met us at the door, led us inside, then up to our rooms. The rest of the class had arrived ahead of us. They were sitting around downstairs, staring self-consciously at the floor. By the time we were unpacked and joined them, the chief instructor was on the scene. Captain Ezra Shine proved to be a sharp article. After a speech of welcome, he told us about the area, what we could expect, and what was expected of us. He also cleared up any illusions we might have had about being made into agents in 30 days. Although some of you may have doubts about pursuing this line of endeavor any further than that, let me assure you it could happen. You wouldn't be here if such a possibility didn't exist. So it is absolutely imperative you maintain your covers at all time and at all costs. I was wondering just how well I could learn to speak a foreign language in a month when the captain began to call the class roll. He rattled off names such as Dusty, Bob, Earl, Raymond, and Homer. Then came an original one, Osane. It belonged to a little fellow about 40 with the manner of a gentleman and the looks of a cross between Roland Young and the White Rabbit. Mitch, Gordon, and I decided to throw in with him on the spot. The captain read on down the list with the individual members rising to be instructed. Student Cobber. Sir, it hardly seemed necessary to say here. Ah, yes, Cobber. You have been chosen class leader and will be in charge of your 21 mates for the next month. Don't look so horrified. It won't be that bad. I was too stunned to say anything, but Mitch mournfully informed Gordon, we've cast our lot with the copper's narc. After the roll call and introductions, we met the captain privately in his office. The purpose was to go over our cover stories with him. If he didn't like them or could find flaws in them, they had to be changed. After pleading in vain to get out of the class leader assignment, I gave him my story. Robert Hawthorne, age 23, single, born and educated in New Orleans, former captain in the paratroops, injured in the North African jump, medically discharged from the Army, now located in Washington, trying to get a job with the State Department. The narrative was complete with facts, names, and dates. He picked at it a while. I knew the answers, and he said it would do. It would seem I had made a fortunate choice, he said, leaning back in his chair and lighting a cigarette. Former paratroop captain should make a fine class leader. Sir, the time has come to tell the truth, said I, determined to lie my way out, if possible. The only thing I've ever commanded was the awkward squad in a CCC camp. Not if you're 23, you didn't. Ask the next student to come in, will you? He was not to be denied. Things started the next morning. We drew fatigues to work in and half a dozen textbooks. Our first class was radio, so we took an aptitude test for sending and receiving, Morse code. The schedule called for an hour of radio every day, the object being to learn how to send and receive a minimum of 5 words a minute. I marked the highest aptitude grade in the class, but the day I left E, I could send 2 words a minute and receive 3. Everyone else was running 10 and 15 with no trouble at all. The diddy-da-dit business was quite beyond me. Another hour each day dealt with a different kind of code, cryptography. It was fascinating, but too much at a crack left the mind fuzzy. After the class period, we had homework, digging a message out of a code or putting one into a code. We learned 2 master systems, both depending on a set of keywords which could be changed as often as necessary. Properly used, they were as close to being unbreakable as codes could be. Knowing the way the code worked didn't help unless you knew the keyword arrangement. Keyword arrangement 2. We caught on to the codes in 3 days. The rest of the time, we fractured our brains trying to figure out messages in which there were intentional mistakes. It involved all the niceties of doing analytical calculus, estimating the corporate income tax for General Motors, and picking a good thing in the 5th race at Belmont Park. The instructor was a kind, patient, and brilliant man. The fact that the entire class ended up knowing how to handle those codes was a tribute to his teaching genius rather than to our ability to grasp. The last few minutes of every cryptography class found the air thick with 2 things: flying code pads and enraged screams of, to hell with it, I'll send the son of a bitch straight. We had seemingly endless hours of indoor classwork, most of it listening to lectures or watching films. We learned police methods, Gestapo methods, SS methods, Japanese Secret Service methods, and Italian Carbonari methods. There is an extensive course in body search, then an even longer one in how to hide something in or on your own body, how to search a room, then how to conceal something in the same room, how to tap a phone, how to know if one was tapped, how to rig up a dictaphone from a regular telephone, and how to plan it, how to steal anything you could lift, how to open letters and reseal them, how to tail someone through hell and high water, how to get rid of someone tailing you, how to break into practically anything, anywhere, and get out again, leaving the place looking untouched. There was an excellent course on lockpicking, another on how to make and use skeleton keys. We learned how to use secret writing and how to detect it, how to interrogate a person, and how to trick them into revealing things, how to maintain cover, and the hundreds of ways it could be broken, how to pass messages over the phone or by hand, the best way to carry secret documents, the best way to take them from someone else. In the rough stuff department, how to kill with a small rock, a pencil, or even a folded newspaper, how to act in enemy territory, how to avoid checks and searches. Yet, all we learned was no more than a fraction of what a man or woman had to know in order to stay alive one day where it counted. An E student was a jack of all agent trades, but master of none. They might make a master of him later on. We had our share of outdoor work too, much of it a carbon copy of what I'd taught in areas F and B. One new twist was learning how to milk a cow. We damn near pulled the poor animal apart. Another was learning how to drive various foreign cars. Since my cover included 3 heroic years in the Army, I could claim knowledge of most of the outdoor work. This was designed to get me some time off, but it was boomerang. Captain Shine promptly made me an assistant instructor in all phases of training, which were military or paramilitary in nature. When it came to the special equipment and secret weapons, I wasn't much help, and I was less when they brought out the specialized demolitions expert. There was exploding fountain pens, incendiary bombs, which looked and wrote like mechanical pencils, and plastic explosive, which looked, felt, smelled, tasted, and behaved as though it were modeling clay, until you stuck a fuse and detonator in it. The pens, pencils, and modeling clay were only 3 of literally dozens of gadgets which had been invented and expanded by the research and development branch of the OSS. Most of them were hellishly clever, and all were effective. It got to the point where we expected anything in the area to blow up or burst into flames. The break cover game went on day and night. I didn't trust anyone, least of all Mitch, Gordon, and Osane. They returned the compliment. My luggage was searched and handled so often it began to wear out. I left the locks open to save them the ravages of 21 amateur raffles. It was wise to think carefully before answering even the most innocuous question. The best way to do it was to stall by countering in turn with another question. That could be taken to some fairly ridiculous extremes though. What time is it? What does your watch say? The big event was when the mail arrived each day at noon. They sent it up from Washington with the real names covered by thick black crayon marks and the student names written in pencil. Once the letters were passed out, the party started. To lessen physical violence, there were certain parts of the house and grounds known as safe areas. While you were in one of those, you could read your mail, and no one was allowed to walk up, hit you over the head with a chair, and steal your envelopes. Outside of these safe areas, anything went, and often did. If you kept your mail after reading it, you risked having it stolen or simply taken by force. Once they got the envelope, it was a simple matter to soak off the black crayon, and there went the most important part of your cover. None of this disturbed me. I didn't get much mail, and what I received I burned after one quick reading. On the rare occasions when I did stray out of a safe area with a letter in one hand, I was swinging a baseball bat in the other. One Saturday night we had mock court. A student would be brought into the room and questioned in front of his class and staff by 2 other students. The object was to break the defendant's cover. The pair of interrogators could use any and all methods except physical force. We all had a crack at both sides. Each case lasted 10 minutes, and the class voted to express their opinion as to who had won the case, prosecutors or defendant. I had the good fortune to go up against a couple of dim bulbs, Homer and Raymond by name, and didn't have much trouble. They started off in an eminently predictable manner by asking about my family background, so I claimed I was a bastard and had absolutely no idea who my father might be. Gordon added to the confusion by roaring, "Bastards all," every time anyone paused for breath. Then Osane and I teamed up to wreak havoc on Student Earl, an obnoxious little bundle of conceit who was Gordon's pet hate. My partner disclaimed any previous legal training, which may or may not have been the truth, but he would have made one hell of a district attorney. All I had to do was add volume to the proceedings. Hossein had Earl on the ropes in 5 minutes and then managed to knock 2 large holes in his cover. We won the case hands down, our only trouble coming from the irrepressible Gordon, who would start a popular demonstration of approval each time we scored a point. I was about to have him thrown out for obstructing justice when our time expired. Upon investigation, we found that certain light-hearted elements had smuggled 3 cases of beer into the courtroom. By the time Gordon's turn to be questioned came around, one of his prosecutors had the good sense to charge him with being drunk and disorderly. That passed by acclamation, which disappointed the defendant. He had planned to plead guilty, since the backbenches were resounding to the chorus of a well-known drinking song. The staff, which was doing most of the singing, called off further litigation. There was still time for Gordon to make an eloquent speech demanding death in the gas chamber for Earl. Most of the jury was out on the lawn playing touch football in the moonlight, but one of those remaining took it upon himself to remind the orator, "Fine idea, but we have no gas chamber." Gordon's reply was characteristic. "Then build one. That man has got to go." Every 4 days we had an evening to ourselves. Near the end of our 3rd week, during one of these, Mitch was struggling with his code homework. 3 others were copying his work as fast as he did it. Gordon and I were playing blackjack for astronomical stakes, and Hossein was deep in a book. Captain Shine walked in on this group and sprang the news of our first problem. The class would be taken to Baltimore the next morning and turned loose. Each student was expected to spend the day alone, penetrate some factory plant, shipyard, or similar business engaged in war work, and bring back proof of successful penetration. Any place in the Baltimore area would do, so long as it was a war plant. Penetrating a brewery or hairpin factory wasn't considered a test of our abilities, such as they were. We would be in civilian clothes with a maximum of $5 and no papers. If we got nabbed, we were to talk our way out of it. There was no phone number to call this trip. I didn't exactly break out in a cold sweat at the thought of someone putting the arm on me, but there was one angle I preferred not to think about. Whoever got caught would probably wind up in the custody of the Baltimore police. I'd heard about those boys. If they put their minds to it, you'd confess to anything from the Lindenberg snatch to the murder of Cock Robin. We left with Captain Shine's parting words of encouragement. "Work alone, do the job. I hope to see you all back here by midnight. Good luck." Gordon provided the epilogue, and when the man starts with the rubber hose, tell him you're just playing spy. He'll believe you. In Baltimore, our quartet paused long enough for the traditional hand clasp, then scattered 4 ways. Hossein's parting shot summed it up. "If anything happens to me, get libelets." There I was on Charles Street, with instructions to go into the Valley of the Shade and return. If I could do my work and get back to the Mount Royal Hotel, they worked that place to death by 11 at night, I would return to Area E in triumph. I spent the morning wandering around, mulling over possible targets and drawing suspicious looks. My ultimate choice was a branch plant of the Revere Copper and Brass Company, which was in a section of South Baltimore honeycombed with alleys. Not that I lacked confidence, but anyone who came after me was in for plenty of exercise. As I started back downtown, a police squad car drove up and slowed down at the corner where I was standing. There, wedged in the back seat between 2 plainclothes bruisers, was Student Bob. He looked straight at me, but neither one of us so much as blinked. He didn't, I couldn't. One gone, and he had to go right in front of me. The minute I walked into my selected target, I wished to God I'd never heard of the place. I was knee-deep in plant police, uniformed security guards, and everyone in the joint wore a large identity badge complete with photograph. The receptionist nailed me before I could pivot and walk right out again, so I asked to see the employment manager with regard to securing a position in the public relations section. I was given a 3-page form to fill out, which I did, hoping all the while that what I said to the man while he interviewed me would approximate what I put on the paper. While waiting to be called, I decided the best proof of penetration would be to hook one of the employee badges. The interview turned out to be a heartwarming affair, which made me feel the complete scoundrel. A kindly, sincere old gentleman looked over the form I had forged, asked me a few additional questions, seemed quite impressed with my mythical employment record, didn't attach any importance to the fact my discharge papers were in the suitcase, which had been mischecked and temporarily lost, and ended up offering me a position. After what you've been through, Mr. Hawthorne, he said warmly, I personally would consider it a privilege to have you join our organization. While I sat there telling lie after lie, I saw a box on his desk half filled with what I imagined were badges of former employees. It didn't take long to get one. He got up and went across the room to a filing cabinet, and the moment his back was turned, I made a grab. I hated the thought of deceiving him any more than necessary, so I asked for a little time to think things over, thanked him profusely, and said I'd call first thing in the morning. On the way out, I stopped in a washroom and took a look at the badge. One glance at the picture, and I abandoned plans for a stroll around the Revere copper and brass plant. The rightful owner was a man, but his ancestors came from the Dark Continent. I left the plant and headed back uptown. It didn't seem wise to wander around the streets with no papers and a hot badge, so I took in a double-feature motion picture, then dinner, which left me with $1 and 2 hours to kill. A municipal band concert solved that problem. Our quartet regrouped at the rendezvous, and we told each other what wonderful agents we were all the way back to the area. Bob wasn't there when we arrived. He'd never shown up at his car for the return trip. I told Captain Shine what I'd seen in the police car, and he'd hurried off to make a phone call. Bob was the only student who had run into real trouble. Some of the boys hadn't been able to penetrate anything, but they hadn't been picked up. The captain came back with the welcome news that Bob had been located, he was all right, and would be back in the morning. We went to bed on that. At breakfast, Bob came in with the eggs, looking dead tired and quite chagrined. He'd been nailed in a 1,000,000-to-1 shot for resembling a racketeer the police had ordered out of town. At the station house, he was able to prove he wasn't the Hood, but his lack of identifying papers aroused suspicion, and they held him for further investigation. Captain Shine had sprung him by calling the OSS contact man in Baltimore. With all of the flock safe in the fold, we had a small critique. Each student got up and told his harrowing tale, then the staff tore his performance to shred. No one came through unscathed. Gordon was blistered for letting a plant identification photographer take his picture. Osane got the same treatment for going through an executive's desk while the executive was in the next room. Mitch was straightened out about staying too long once he'd made his penetration. I caught a real blast for coming up with a useless badge. Actually, Captain Shine and the staff were delighted with our work, but they were too wise to let us know at the time. Whatever else we had, we didn't lack self-confidence.